I signed that form without thinking twice. Beta, check, submit. 3 years later, here I was, standing in Darren Kent's conference room, delivering a presentation like my life was perfectly normal, but nothing about my situation was normal anymore. Under my loose sweater, my stomach was starting to show. 4 months along and count. Darren's gray eyes were fixed on me with that sharp analytical stare he always had. Cold, controlled, the perfect alpha CEO. And me? I was just Johnny Lane, junior analyst who made one terrible mistake at an office party when Darren cornered me and I said yes to something I should have refused. Johnny, are these projections realistic? His voice snapped me back to reality. I gestured toward the screen quickly, keeping my voice as steady as possible. Yes, sir, I based everything on last quarter's data. But my focus was crumbling because last night I received a message from the company medical department. Annual checkup now mandatory. Blood test. Physical examination. Everything. What happens when they discover I'm an omega? What happens when the pregnancy shows up on their tests? The meeting ended and I tried to leave the cabin quickly, but Darren's voice stopped me cold. Johnny. Wait. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. Darren stood near his desk, hands casually in his pockets, completely composed. You've seemed distracted lately. Everything all right? I forced a smile onto my face. Yes, sir. Everything's fine. His gaze lingered on me longer than necessary. Medical checkup is next Monday. Don't miss it. My legs felt like they might give out. I walked out of his cabin into the empty corridor, but my mind was pure chaos. My hands were shaking as I made my way back to my desk. How was I supposed to handle this? How could I possibly avoid that medical test? Every question circled through my brain with no answers in sight. I sat down at my desk and pretended to review files, but the words blurred together. The office buzzed with normal activity around me while my world was falling apart. Sarah from accounting walked past, laughing at something on her phone. Marcus was arguing with someone over budget numbers. Everyone lived in their safe, simple realities while mine was a ticking time bomb. My phone buzzed. A reminder notification. Medical appointment. Monday 9 a.m. Mandatory attendance. I stared at the screen until it went dark. My reflection ghostly in the black glass. 4 months pregnant. Fake beta status. Alpha boss who would destroy me if he knew the truth. There was no way out that I could see. The afternoon dragged on painfully. I avoided eye contact with everyone, kept my head down and tried to make myself invisible. But invisibility wasn't going to save me from a blood test. At 5 o'clock, most people started packing up to leave. I stayed at my desk, pretending to finish work while actually spiraling into panic. Trevor stopped by my desk on his way out. You coming to happy hour? Everyone's going to that new place downtown. I shook my head without looking up. Can't tonight. Too much work to catch up on. Trevor studied me for a moment. You sure you're okay? You've been off lately. Just tired. I lied smoothly. This project has been consuming all my energy. He didn't look convinced but didn't push it either. All right. Text me if you need anything. After he left, I sat alone in the dimming office. The cleaning crew started their rounds on the other floors. I could hear the distant hum of vacuum cleaners and the jangling of keys. The city outside the windows began lighting up as evening fell. Thousands of people going home to their normal lives. I pulled my sweater tighter around myself, feeling the small but growing curve of my stomach. This baby was real. This situation was real. And in less than a week, everything could come crashing down. My computer screen glowed with unfinished reports, but I couldn't focus on any of them. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and stared at the search bar. What was I even looking for? Solutions to impossible problems. Ways to fake medical tests. How to disappear without a trace. I typed how to avoid mandatory workplace medical examination. The results were useless. Legal advice about discrimination. Articles about employee rights. Nothing that applied to someone like me, someone living a complete lie. I deleted my search history and closed the laptop. The office was almost completely dark now except for the emergency exit signs and the glow from the city outside. I should go home. Sitting here wasn't solving anything. But going home meant being alone with my thoughts, and that felt even worse. I stood up slowly, gathering my things. My bag felt heavier than usual as I slung it over my shoulder. Every movement felt weighted down by dread. The elevator ride down was eerily quiet, just me and my reflection in the polished metal doors. Outside, the evening air was cool against my face. I started walking toward the subway station, joining the flow of commuters heading home. Everyone around me looked tired but content, ready to relax after a long day. I envied them so much it hurt. My phone buzzed again. Another email. I almost didn't check it, but curiosity won out. Reminder: pre-examination paperwork must be completed by Friday. Attached forms require your signature and updated emergency contact information. Emergency contact. Who would I even list? Trevor? My parents who didn't know I was pregnant? Definitely not Darren Kent, the father who had no idea he was about to become a parent. I stopped walking, standing still on the crowded sidewalk while people flowed around me like water around a stone. This was really happening. In less than a week, my carefully constructed lie would be exposed, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop it. Unless an idea flickered in my mind. Dangerous. Possibly illegal. But maybe my only option. I pulled out my phone and opened a new search. This time more specific: fake medical certificates. The results loaded slowly on the subway connection. Dozens of websites offering exactly what I needed. For a price, of course. Everything had a price. I clicked on the first link, my heart racing as I read through the details. $200 for a clean bill of health. Delivered within 48 hours. Undetectable unless they called to verify directly with the fake doctor's office. They provided. My thumb hovered over the contact button. This was wrong. This was fraud. This could get me fired, arrested, completely ruined. But what other choice did I have? The subway doors opened at my stop. I stepped out onto the platform, phone still clutched in my hand, that website still glowing on my screen. I had until Friday to make a decision. Friday to choose between confessing everything or diving deeper into this web of lies. I walked home slowly, the weight of my secret growing heavier with every step. By the time I reached my apartment, I had convinced myself that buying the fake certificate was my only way out. I sat on my couch with my laptop balanced on my knees, staring at that website. The design looked professional enough, testimonials from supposed satisfied customers scrolling down the side. Saved my job, one claimed. No one suspected a thing, said another. $200 to keep my entire life from imploding. It seemed like a bargain. My cursor moved toward the order button. One click. That's all it would take. Enter my payment information, provide the details they needed, and within 2 days I would have documentation that proved I was perfectly healthy, definitely beta, absolutely not pregnant. But my finger wouldn't press down. Something held me back. What if they caught me? Corporate fraud was serious. Darren Kent didn't seem like the type to show mercy to someone who lied to his face. And if they verified the certificate, if they called that fake doctor's office and somehow it all fell apart, I would be finished. Not just fired but potentially facing criminal charges. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes. The apartment was too quiet. Too empty. Just me and my growing secret. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, mind racing through scenarios. Each one ended badly. Exposed at work. Humiliated. Alone. Possibly prosecuted. Morning arrived too soon. I dragged myself out of bed, took a long shower, and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The pregnancy glow people talked about was starting to show. My face looked fuller, soft, and under my shirt, the curve of my stomach was undeniable if anyone looked closely enough. I layered 2 sweaters again before heading to the office. The weather didn't justify it, but hiding did. The morning passed in a blur of emails and spreadsheets. I kept my head down, avoided conversation, and tried to blend into the background. But around noon, Trevor found me hiding in the 6th floor stairwell, sitting on the steps with my phone in my hand. There you are. Been looking everywhere for you. I locked my phone screen quickly. Just needed some air. Trevor sat down beside me, his expression shifting from casual to concerned. Johnny, real talk. What's going on with you? You've been acting strange for weeks now. Avoiding people. Jumpy. Always looking over your shoulder. I wanted to tell him. Trevor was the closest thing I had to a friend in this building. He was trustworthy, kind, the type of person who would help if he could. But this secret was too dangerous to share. If anyone found out, I needed to control how that information spread. I couldn't risk Trevor accidentally letting something slip. Just work stress, I said, standing up. This new project has been more demanding than I expected. Trevor stood too, studying my face like he was trying to read my mind. If something's seriously wrong, you can talk to me. You know that, right? I know, I appreciate it. But honestly, I'm handling it. He didn't look convinced, but he let it go. We walked back to our floor together in silence. The afternoon brought a new kind of torture. I was working at my desk when Darren appeared without warning. He rarely came down to our floor. His office was on the top level, the executive suite with the best views and the most expensive furniture. Seeing him among the regular employees was unusual enough that people noticed, heads turning as he walked through. He stopped at my desk. "Is this your latest report?" He picked up the file I had been reviewing, but his attention wasn't on the papers. He was looking at me. "Yes, sir," I managed to say, though my heart was trying to escape through my throat. Darren set the file down carefully, then moved slightly closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, expensive and woodsy and overwhelming. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back slightly to maintain eye contact. "Johnny," he said quietly, and there was something different in his tone. Something softer than his usual professional distance. "If you're dealing with something, you can tell me. I'm your supervisor, but I'm not unreachable." My hands gripped the edge of my desk. This wasn't the Darren Kent I knew. The cold CEO who made decisions based purely on profit margins and efficiency. This was something else. Something almost concerned. Almost personal. But I knew better than to trust it. Darren Kent cared about his company. Period. If he discovered that I had lied on my employment forms, that I was an omega masquerading as a beta, that I was carrying his child from a drunken mistake at a company party, he would eliminate me without hesitation. "Everything's fine, sir," I said, forcing my professional mask back into place. "Thank you for checking." He held my gaze longer than necessary, like he was searching for cracks in my facade. Then he nodded slowly and walked away, leaving me sitting there with my pulse racing and my hands shaking. The rest of the day crawled by. Every time someone walked past my desk, I tensed. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected bad news. By the time 5 o'clock arrived, I was exhausted from the constant anxiety. I went home and opened my laptop again. That website was still bookmarked. The fake medical certificate was still available. $200 still seemed like a small price to pay for safety. But as I sat there in my quiet apartment, I realized something. Buying that certificate would only delay the inevitable. Eventually, my pregnancy would become too obvious to hide. Eventually, someone would notice. Eventually, the truth would come out. A fake certificate would just add another layer of lies to the mountain I was already building. And when it all came crashing down, that extra deception would only make things worse. I closed the laptop without ordering anything. Instead, I pulled up my bank account and looked at my savings. Not much, but enough to survive for a few months if I was careful. Enough to potentially leave town, start over somewhere else, where nobody knew me and nobody cared about my designation or my past. Running away seemed cowardly, but it also seemed like the only solution that didn't involve either confessing everything or committing fraud. I spent the evening researching cities where I could disappear. Places far from here, places where the cost of living was low and questions weren't asked. Places where I could have this baby in peace and figure out my life without Darren Kent's shadow hanging over everything. It wasn't a perfect plan. It wasn't even a good plan. But it was something. As I fell asleep that night, I made a decision. I would give it until Friday. If I could think of any other option, any other way out, I would take it. But if Friday arrived and I still had no better solution, I would pack my bags and leave. Better to disappear than to be destroyed. Monday morning arrived with a sense of impending doom, settling over me like a heavy blanket. I stood in my bathroom, applying my scent blocker patch to the usual spot on my neck. But as I pressed it down, I noticed something wrong. The adhesive felt weaker. The patch itself looked slightly worn even though I had just taken it out of the package. Pregnancy hormones made omega scents stronger, more potent. The blockers I had been using for years were designed for normal situations, not for someone carrying a child. I grabbed a second patch and applied it as well, hoping that double coverage would be enough. It had to be enough. If any alpha in the office caught even a hint of my real scent, if they detected the subtle change that pregnancy caused, everything would unravel immediately. I dressed in layers again, checking my reflection multiple times before leaving. The curve of my stomach was becoming harder to hide. From the front, with the loose clothing, I could almost pass as normal. But from the side, if someone looked carefully, they might notice. The office felt different that morning. More oppressive, more dangerous. I kept my distance from everyone, especially the alphas. Marcus from finance, who always seemed too perceptive. Sarah's partner James, who visited sometimes and had that intense alpha awareness. And of course Darren, whose office loomed above us all like a constant threat. I made it to lunch without incident. Though my nerves were frayed, Trevor cornered me in the break room while I was pouring coffee with shaking hands. Seriously, what's going on with you? I didn't look at him, focusing intently on adding sugar to my cup. Nothing. Just tired. You're wearing 2 sweaters. The air conditioning is on full blast. It's like 70 degrees in here. I get cold easily. Trevor moved to stand directly in my line of sight, forcing me to acknowledge him. Johnny, we've worked together for 2 years. I know when something's wrong. You're not sleeping. You're losing weight in your face but somehow gaining it everywhere else. You won't make eye contact anymore, and you're jumpy as hell. Every observation hit like an arrow. He had noticed more than I realized. But noticing wasn't the same as knowing, and I needed to keep it that way. I'm dealing with some personal stuff, I said quietly. Nothing that affects my work. Nothing I want to talk about. Trevor's expression softened. If you need help, I don't. But thank you. He backed off, but the concern in his eyes lingered. I finished making my coffee and escaped back to my desk before he could ask more questions. The afternoon brought new problems. Around 3 o'clock, I felt the scent blocker patches starting to fail. It was subtle, just a slight weakening of the adhesive, but enough to make me paranoid. I excused myself to the restroom and locked myself in a stall, checking the patches with growing panic. They were definitely losing effectiveness. I could smell myself, just barely. That sweet, slightly altered scent that pregnancy created. If I could smell it, an alpha definitely could. I had backup patches in my desk drawer, but getting to them meant walking through the office. I took a deep breath, steadied myself and stepped out of the restroom, and walked directly into Darren Kent in the corridor. We both stopped abruptly. For a frozen second we just stood there, too close, eye to eye. Then I saw his nostrils flare slightly. He was scenting the air, subtle, automatic, the way alphas do without even thinking about it. My heart stopped beating. This was it. He would smell the truth. He would know. Johnny. His voice was measured, controlled. Did you change your scent blocker brand? Think fast. Sound casual. Yes. Actually, my usual one was out of stock, so I tried something new. Still getting used to it. Darren's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His gray eyes moved from my face down to my layered sweaters, lingering there for just a moment too long. That was all he said. Just that single sound. Then he walked past me, continuing down the corridor like nothing had happened. But something had happened. I could feel it in the tension that lingered in the air. He had noticed something. Maybe not the full truth, but enough to be suspicious. Enough to start paying closer attention. I made it back to my desk and immediately replaced both scent blocker patches with fresh ones from my drawer. My hands trembled as I pressed them down, probably too firmly, but I didn't care. I needed them to work. I needed to remain invisible for just a little longer. The rest of the afternoon passed in agonizing slowness. Every time someone walked near my desk, I tensed. Every time I heard footsteps approaching from behind, I held my breath. The paranoia was exhausting, but I couldn't let my guard down. At 4:30, my email pinged with a new message. Subject line, medical examination, updated requirements. I opened it with dread pooling in my stomach. The message explained that due to new company health initiatives, the medical examination would now be more comprehensive than originally stated. Full panel blood work, physical assessment, detailed health history review, and at the bottom in bold text, designation verification will be included as part of standard protocol. Designation verification. They were going to test specifically to confirm what designation each employee had registered as. There would be no faking my way through this. No excuses. No escape. I read the email 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood. But the words remained the same. Friday was the deadline to complete the pre-examination paperwork. Monday was the examination itself. 4 days. I had 4 days before everything fell apart. My phone buzzed. A text from Trevor. You still at your desk? Need to ask you something about the Morrison project. I texted back quickly. Heading home early. Not feeling well. Email me the question. I shut down my computer, grabbed my bag and left the office without saying goodbye to anyone. The elevator ride down felt like descending into darkness. Outside, the early evening air was warm, but I felt cold all the way through. I walked home instead of taking the subway, needing the time to think. The city moved around me in its usual rhythm, but I felt separate from it all, disconnected, like I was watching life happen from behind glass. By the time I reached my apartment, I had made a decision. Not about the fake certificate, not about running away. Something else entirely. I was going to tell Darren Kent the truth. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough. I would explain that I couldn't complete the medical examination for personal reasons. I would offer to resign if necessary. I would try to maintain some control over how this situation unfolded instead of letting it explode in my face. It was a terrible plan. It would probably end with me fired and humiliated. But it was the only option left that didn't involve criminal fraud or abandoning everything I had built here. Tomorrow. I would talk to him tomorrow. Before I lost my nerve. Before the examination happened and took the choice out of my hands entirely. Tonight I would figure out exactly what to say. How to explain the unexplainable. How to ask for mercy from a man who didn't believe in showing weakness. Tomorrow everything would change. One way or another. Friday evening arrived with a false sense of hope that I might actually make it through the weekend without catastrophe. I was wrong. I left my desk at exactly 5:30, earlier than usual, but not suspiciously so. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, relieved to find it empty. Just a quick ride down 15 floors and I would be free for 2 days. 2 days to figure out my next move before everything fell apart on Monday. The doors started to close. Then a hand shot through at the last second, triggering the sensor. The doors reopened. Darren Kent stepped inside. My stomach dropped. Of all the people in this building, of all the possible moments, it had to be him. It had to be now. The doors closed again. Silence filled the small space, thick and suffocating. I pressed myself into the corner, trying to become invisible. Darren stood on the opposite side, checking something on his phone with that same focused intensity he brought to everything. But I knew he was aware of me. Alphas were always aware of their surroundings, always processing information on levels most people didn't even notice. The elevator descended smoothly. 14th floor. 13th. 12th. Then it jerked violently. The lights flickered. The smooth descent became a sudden stop that threw me off balance. I grabbed the handrail to steady myself as the emergency alarm began its soft, repetitive beeping. Damn it, Darren muttered, immediately pressing the emergency call button. Maintenance issue. This building's elevator system has been problematic for months. I stood frozen, unable to respond. The small space suddenly felt even smaller. The air felt thinner. My scent blocker patches, already weakening throughout the day, were now my only protection in an enclosed space with an alpha whose senses were far sharper than any betas would be. Darren glanced at me briefly. Maintenance team has been notified. They estimate 15 minutes for a manual override. 15 minutes. 900 seconds. Each one feeling like an eternity. I shifted slightly toward the corner, trying to create more distance between us. My arms crossed over my chest in what I hoped looked like a casual stance, but was actually an attempt to hide the growing curve of my stomach. You look uncomfortable, Darren observed without looking up from his phone. No, I said too quickly, my voice pitching higher than normal. Just not great with enclosed spaces. Mild claustrophobia. That was a lie. I had never been claustrophobic before, but it was better than the truth. Darren finally looked directly at me, and the intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. Those gray eyes seemed to see through every layer of clothing, every lie, every desperate attempt at concealment. "Johnny, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My throat went completely dry. "What is it?" "That night after the company gala. You remember it, don't you?" The question hit me like a physical blow. That night, the night that changed everything. The night I made the choice that led to this impossible situation. "Sir, that was—" "You've been avoiding me ever since," Darren interrupted, his voice dropping to something softer but somehow more dangerous. 3 months of minimal eye contact, one-word answers in meetings, changing your route when you see me in the hallways. Why? What could I possibly say? That I was carrying his child? That I had lied about my designation? That every time I saw him, I was terrified he would discover the truth and destroy me? "I've been focused on my projects," I said weakly, unable to meet his eyes. "The deadlines have been intense." I didn't mean to seem distant. Darren took a step closer. In the confined elevator, that single step eliminated most of the distance between us. "I think you're hiding something from me. Something significant." My lungs stopped working. The air in the elevator felt too thick to breathe. I pressed harder against the wall behind me, wishing I could somehow pass through it and escape. Then, as if the universe finally decided to show mercy, the elevator jerked again. The lights stabilized. The doors began to slide open with a mechanical groan. I didn't wait for them to fully open. The moment the gap was wide enough, I slipped through and walked rapidly toward the building exit. Not running exactly, but moving fast enough that pursuit would be obvious. Darren didn't follow me, but I could feel his eyes on my back, watching, analyzing, suspecting. I pushed through the building's front doors into the cool evening air. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that Darren Kent suspected something. Maybe not the full truth yet, but enough to start investigating. Enough to start asking questions that I couldn't answer without exposing everything. The weekend suddenly felt less like a reprieve and more like a countdown to inevitable disaster. I walked to the subway station in a daze, barely aware of the crowds around me. The train was packed with Friday evening commuters, everyone heading home to their normal lives. I squeezed into a corner and held onto the overhead rail, letting the rocking motion of the train distract me from my spiraling thoughts. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door behind me and slid down to sit on the floor with my back against it. The silence of my empty home pressed in on all sides. My phone buzzed. A text from Trevor. "You disappeared fast. Everything okay?" I typed back, "Fine. Just tired. Have a good weekend." Another buzz. This time an email notification. I almost didn't check it, but curiosity won out. The sender was the medical department. The subject line read, "Examination rescheduled." My heart started racing again as I opened it. Due to the updated health initiative requirements, all employee medical examinations had been moved up. Instead of Monday, they would now begin Sunday afternoon. Emergency weekend hours had been arranged. My new appointment time was Sunday at 2 o'clock. Sunday, tomorrow. I had lost an entire day. I read the email 3 more times, hoping I had misunderstood, but the words remained unchanged. 24 hours. That's all I had left. I spent Friday night staring at my ceiling, unable to sleep. Every possible scenario played through my mind. Running away seemed more appealing by the hour, but where would I go? How would I survive? I had some savings, but not enough to start over completely. Saturday passed in a blur of anxiety. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything. I cleaned my apartment obsessively, trying to distract myself, but my mind kept returning to that examination room, to the blood tests that would reveal everything, to the moment when my carefully constructed world would collapse. Saturday evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and removed my scent blocker patches. The faint sweet scent of my true designation filled the small space. I stared at my reflection, at the person I had been pretending not to be for 3 years. Maybe it was time to stop pretending. Maybe it was time to face the consequences of my choices. Sunday morning arrived too soon. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were professional but comfortable. I applied fresh scent blocker patches, even though I knew they wouldn't matter soon. By this afternoon, everyone would know the truth. At 1:30, I left my apartment and headed toward the office. The streets were quiet on Sunday, most businesses closed. Only a few people out walking dogs or running errands. The building looked different on a weekend, less imposing somehow. I took the elevator up to the medical department on the 3rd floor. The doors opened to a waiting area that was empty except for one other person. Darren Kent sat in one of the chairs, still dressed in casual weekend clothes instead of his usual suit. He looked up when I entered, and something in his expression told me this wasn't a coincidence. "Johnny," he said quietly, "we need to talk. Before you go in there." I stood frozen in the doorway, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and run. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. Darren stood slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I requested an early appointment slot, right before yours. I wanted to catch you before your examination." "Why?" He gestured to the empty chairs. "Please sit. We don't have much time and there are things you need to know." I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to be here at all. But my legs were shaking and the chair suddenly seemed like a good idea. I sat on the edge of the seat, maintaining maximum distance from him. Darren sat down 2 chairs away, giving me space. 3 days ago, the HR department received an anonymous tip about you, about your designation status being falsified. The words landed like hammer blows. "You knew. This whole time, you knew." "I didn't send the tip, if that's what you're thinking. But I did know about it. Miss Stone informed me immediately, because you report directly to my department." My hands clenched into fists on my lap. "So you've just been waiting, watching me panic, watching me scramble to figure out how to save myself." "I've been trying to understand the situation before taking action," Darren corrected. "There's a difference." "What difference?" "Either way, I'm finished. The examination is in 20 minutes. They're going to discover everything and then I'll be fired for fraud, possibly prosecuted." Darren leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his expression more serious than I had ever seen it. "That's why I'm here, to give you options before you walk into that room." "What options?" "There's nothing left. You could be honest with me right now. Tell me the truth about your designation. Tell me why you falsified your records. Tell me what you're so desperately trying to hide." I laughed, but it came out bitter and broken. "So you can have all the information before you destroy me." "No thank you. I'm not trying to destroy you, Johnny. I'm trying to help you." "Why? Why would you help me? You're the CEO. I lied on official company documents. You should be the first person calling for my termination." Darren was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more personal. "Because that night at the gala, something happened between us. Something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. And in the past 3 months I've watched you change. I've watched you become more withdrawn, more frightened. I've noticed things that don't add up." "Like what?" "Like the fact that you're wearing layers in summer. Like the fact that your scent has been changing despite the blockers you use. Like the fact that you avoid any physical proximity to me specifically, while maintaining normal distance from other colleagues." Each observation felt like a chess piece moving into place, surrounding me with no escape. "I also know," Darren continued carefully, "that Omega scents change in specific ways under specific circumstances. And I know that we were together that night, before you started avoiding me." The implication hung in the air between us. He knew, maybe not with absolute certainty, but he had connected enough dots to see the picture. "So tell me," Darren said quietly, "am I right about what you're hiding?" Before I could answer, the door to the examination room opened. A nurse appeared, clipboard in hand. "Johnny Lane? We're ready for you now." I stood automatically, my body moving on autopilot, even as my mind raced. This was it. The moment where everything ended. "Wait," Darren said, standing as well. He looked at the nurse. "Could you give us 5 more minutes? This is important." The nurse frowned. "Dr. Matthews is on a tight schedule today. We're already running weekend hours as an accommodation." 5 minutes, Darren repeated, and something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. The nurse nodded reluctantly and retreated back into the examination room. Darren turned to me. "You don't have to do this examination. Not today. Not like this. I don't have a choice. HR gave me 48 hours. That deadline is today." You have choices. You can resign right now before the examination. Walk away on your own terms. And then what? I have no other job lined up. No references I can use. No way to explain the gap in my employment or why I left so suddenly. Or Darren said, his voice dropping even lower. You can trust me. Tell me the truth. And let me handle the HR situation. Why would you do that? What do you get out of protecting someone who lied to your company? Darren stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the conflict in his gray eyes. Because if my suspicions are correct, this isn't just about a falsified designation. This is about something much more significant. Something that involves both of us. My resolve cracked. 3 months of carrying this secret alone, 3 months of fear and isolation, suddenly felt like too much weight to bear. I'm Omega, I said quietly. I lied on my hiring documents. I've been using scent blockers and suppressants for 3 years to maintain the deception. Darren didn't look surprised. He just nodded slowly, accepting the confession. And I'm pregnant. 4 months. From that night at the gala. From you. The words hung in the air between us. I waited for anger, for disgust, for the cold corporate calculation that would end with my termination. Instead, Darren exhaled slowly, like he had been holding his breath for months. Thank you for telling me. That's it? Thank you? I just confessed to fraud and told you I'm carrying your child. And all you can say is thank you? What do you want me to say, Johnny? That I'm shocked? I've suspected for weeks. That I'm angry? I'm not. That I'm going to fire you? I already told you I'm not. Then what happens now? The examination room door opened again. The nurse looked impatient. Mr. Lane, we really need to start your appointment. Darren looked at me steadily. Tell her you're canceling. Tell her you're withdrawing from the company health program. Then come with me to my office. We're going to fix this situation properly, but like this. Not under pressure from HR deadlines and mandatory examinations. I can't just cancel. Miss Stone, I'll handle Miss Stone. I'll handle all of it. But right now, you need to make a choice. Trust me. Or face that examination alone. I looked at the nurse waiting in the doorway. I looked at Darren standing beside me, offering an impossible solution. And I made my choice. I need to cancel my appointment. I told the nurse. I'm withdrawing from the health program evaluation. The nurse's expression tightened with disapproval, but she made a note on her clipboard. You'll need to file formal paperwork with HR. I'll take care of it, Darren said firmly. We left the medical department together, riding the elevator up to the executive floor in silence. My heart was still racing, but for the first time in months I felt like I might not be facing this alone. The question was whether trusting Darren Kent was the smartest decision I had ever made, or the biggest mistake of my life. Darren's office on Sunday afternoon felt different than it did during the week. Quieter, more intimate. The usual bustle of executive assistants and department heads was absent, leaving just the two of us in the large space with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He gestured for me to sit on the leather couch near the windows rather than in the formal chairs facing his desk. It was a small gesture, but it shifted the dynamic from boss-employee to something more personal. I sat carefully, my body tense with uncertainty. Darren took a seat on the opposite end of the couch, maintaining distance but staying close enough for conversation. First thing, he said, I need you to understand that what I'm about to propose isn't coming from me as your CEO. This is personal. This is about you, me, and the situation we're in together. What are you proposing? We handle the HR issue by being proactive instead of reactive. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to submit a formal request to update your designation records. Not as a correction of fraud, but as a voluntary disclosure that was delayed due to personal circumstances. I shook my head. That won't work. They'll see through it immediately. Miss Stone already has the anonymous tip. She knows something's wrong. Miss Stone works for me. And while she takes her HR responsibilities seriously, she also understands that not every situation fits into neat policy categories. If I present this as an executive decision with full transparency about the circumstances, she'll accept it. And the pregnancy? How exactly do we explain that away? Darren was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. We don't explain it away. We acknowledge it. You're an Omega employee who is pregnant. That's not against company policy, even if some of the older policies make it seem like omegas aren't welcome here. Those policies exist because you created them, I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. You've spent years building a company culture that values alphas and betas, that sees omegas as liabilities, and now you're telling me you're going to protect an omega employee who lied about his designation? Yes, because those policies were wrong. I was wrong. The admission surprised me. Darren Kent didn't strike me as someone who admitted mistakes easily. When did you figure it out? I asked. When did you realize I was omega? I started suspecting about 6 weeks ago. Small things at first. The way you reacted when I came too close. The layers of clothing despite the weather. The scent blocker patches that you thought were hidden by your collar, but were occasionally visible when you turned your head. Then the scent itself started changing in ways that blocker patches couldn't fully mask. In the pregnancy? That took longer. I knew something significant was different, but I didn't connect it to pregnancy until about 2 weeks ago. You started unconsciously placing your hand on your stomach when you thought no one was watching. And the timing lined up with that night at the gala. I closed my eyes, feeling exposed in a way that went beyond physical vulnerability. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to work here. To be good at my job. To prove that I could succeed based on my skills, not my designation. I understand that, and I respect it. But Johnny, you can't keep hiding. The stress alone isn't healthy for you or the baby. And practically speaking, you won't be able to conceal the punchy much longer anyway. So what's your solution? I come clean to everyone? Face the judgment and the gossip? Watch my career implode in real time? My solution is that we face this together. As partners. As parents. The word parents hit me like a shock. What are you saying? Darren turned to face me more directly. I'm saying that I take responsibility for my part in this situation. That night at the gala wasn't just your choice. It was mine too. And the child you carrying is as much my responsibility as yours. You can't possibly want to be involved. You're the CEO of a major corporation. You have a reputation to maintain. A pregnant Omega employee is exactly the kind of scandal you've spent years avoiding. I don't care about the scandal. I care about doing what's right. Since when do you care about what's right over what's profitable? The question came out sharper than I intended, but Darren didn't flinch. Since I realized that the person I've been watching struggle for 3 months, the person who's been terrified and alone, is someone I care about more than I care about corporate optics. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. You barely know me. I know you better than you think. I know you're brilliant at analysis. I know you work harder than anyone else in your department. I know you care deeply about doing things correctly even when it costs you personally. And I know that you've been carrying an impossible burden alone because you thought there was no other option. Tears started forming before I could stop them. This isn't how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to be angry. You're supposed to fire me. I'm not going to fire you. I'm going to support you. Through the pregnancy, through whatever comes after, through all of it. Why? Give me one good reason why you would derail your entire life for someone who lied to you. Darren reached across the space between us and gently took my hand. His touch was warm, steady, grounding. Because that night at the gala wasn't just a mistake for me. It was the first time in years I felt something real. Something that wasn't about business or strategy or maintaining appearances. And when you started avoiding me afterward, it bothered me more than it should have. I told myself it was nothing. That I was being irrational. But I couldn't stop thinking about you. That's not enough reason to upend your life. Maybe not. But finding out you're pregnant with my child? That's more than enough. I won't be an absent father, Johnny. I won't be someone who walks away from responsibility. And I won't let you face this alone when I have the power to make it easier. I wanted to argue. I wanted to push him away, to protect myself from the inevitable disappointment when he changed his mind. But I was so tired of fighting alone. What happens tomorrow? I asked quietly. Tomorrow we go to HR together. We update your records. We explain the situation honestly, and we make it clear that this is non-negotiable. You're staying employed, you're being supported through your pregnancy, and anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me directly. And after that, we figure things out one day at a time. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. This is new territory for both of us. but we'll navigate it together. I looked down at our joined hands. 3 months ago, I thought that night at the gala was the worst mistake of my life. Now, sitting in Darren's office with the truth finally exposed, I wondered if maybe it was the beginning of something different. Something that might actually resemble a future. Okay, I said softly. Together. Darren squeezed my hand gently. Together.